The Colts brought in an intriguing 9-man draft class last weekend, and it left me with 3 big themes. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right. Thanks for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's show is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, which is the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So grab your friends and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. What is up, everybody? This is Jake Arthur from horseshoehuddle.com, and we are continuing our draft coverage today, kind of looking at the group as a whole, but specifically, when I looked at this thing, it really gave me 3 big thoughts. First, really building around Anthony Richardson and doing well by him like we all hoped the Colts would have done with Andrew Luck. And, seeing the downfall of Andrew Luck, everyone had a laundry list of things they would have done differently. And I think the Colts are doing that with Richardson, or they're at least trying to. Next, the Colts have met plenty of their short-term future needs. There still are some immediate needs that they had going into the draft that they probably still have. I think fans and the team looks at it a little different. But as far as needs that they're going to have a little bit down the line, I think they've met some of those. And then lastly, there's some veterans that have been put on notice. So we'll go around them as well here in a bit. But first up, you're welcome, Anthony Richardson. So this all really started this offseason with free agency. The Colts didn't have any of their starting 5 offensive linemen being free agents. It was a group that already had performed really, really well together in the last season and a half. Even last year, they only started like 5 or 6 games together, but the group as a whole was really good. So top to bottom, there was only a couple guys who were hitting free agency. That was Danny Pinter and Jack Anderson. The Colts even brought them back on 1-year deals. So the entire starting line from last year was back. They weren't done, though. They added 2 offensive linemen in the draft that they really, really love, and Matt Gonsalves and Tanner Bortolini in the 3rd and 4th rounds, respectively. I really like these moves for the Colts. Now, are either of these 2 guys going to start as rookies? Maybe not. If you look at any area of the roster that's maybe, or any area of the offensive line that's maybe open to replacement, you maybe look at right guard with Will Fries. But even Fries has played really, really good football. So I don't think they're looking to replace him. I think really this is like next year. You're dealing with the entire interior being free agents, but we'll get to that here in a bit. But I really like these moves for the Colts. I think they're making sure that not only right now is the offensive line really good, but that it's going to stay that way for years to come. Gonsalves is a guy he's kind of going to be your Joe Haeg type. He can do some things on the interior. He can back up your play at tackle as well. And then Tanner Bortolini is just a swing guy inside. Can play any of the 3 interior positions. I do think there's an eventual plan for really either of these guys to be starters because, again, they loved these guys. And offensive linemen, you don't have to draft in the 1st or 2nd round to be starters. 3rd or 4th round is totally appropriate for those guys. But, yeah, outside of catastrophic injuries, I really don't think there's any reason for this offensive line not to be awesome in 2024. There is competition everywhere. We already know the starting 5 is good, and they're good whether they're playing together or not, whether there's patchwork being done on the offensive line. But this group, top to bottom, it's going to be a really tough group to make through training camp. This is arguably the best position group. Your offensive and defensive line are really your best position groups on the roster, and that's how Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard would like it to be. So that's good. So they've got the protection down pat. What about the weapons? So in the 2nd round at pick number 52, the Colts added the type of wide receiver that they really were missing in Adonai Mitchell. They had Michael Pittman Jr., who is the do-it-all dirty work. Anywhere on the field you need me, I can do it type receiver. That's a 100-catch guy. Pittman, no mystery to him. He is you need him perfectly. Josh Downs, the slot guy, does a lot of things really well. He's very, very smart. The chemistry with him and Anthony Richardson is going to be really intriguing to watch going forward. He's not just a slot guy as well, though he can do some things downfield as well. We've seen that. Is really able to manipulate defenders and send them packing one way while he goes in another. So those guys were great to already have. You had Alec Pierce as well, who is your field stretcher. That's kind of his niche. He's not yet a complete receiver. He doesn't do a whole lot more other than that, at least not effectively. He's a very good blocker as well, but you're not really, that's not what you're bringing guys in as second-round picks to be as blockers. So they needed a guy like Adonai Mitchell, who's an explosive playmaker with all-around potential, like who can do anything. Like a Devontae Adams can do everything. Short, intermediate, long, middle of the field, outside the field, back shoulder, whatever you need a receiver to do, Mitchell has the potential to do that. He has a ton of great traits, athletically, physically. He's just got to kind of put it all together. Luckily, as long as Mitchell is open to it and is determined to be great, he's got the perfect wide receivers coach to help him in Reggie Wayne. So the Colts are going to put resources into getting Mitchell to be the player that they hope he can become. And, that's a guy who can maybe grow with Anthony for 10 years. We've seen a lot of great quarterbacks of the past have this guy that they've grown with for a decade. With Peyton, it was Marvin and then Reggie. Andrew Luck had T.Y. Hilton. Hopefully for Richardson, it's Pittman and or Mitchell, kind of a Peyton with Marvin and then the Reggie thing. So fingers crossed for them that they're able to do that. Colts weren't done, though. They got Anthony Gould in the middle rounds, who is another capable downfield yards after catch type of guy. I don't think he's going to have a huge role in the offense, maybe like an Isaiah McKenzie type of role. I think his main thing is going to be as a return specialist, which was one of the better ones in college football, was all conference, perhaps all American, if I remember correctly, in 2022, but easily noted as one of the top return specialists in college football, and the Colts now have him. So plenty of speed from him. And again, yard after catch ability. That's what kick returning is all about. So you get the ball in this guy's hands in the open field on offense, you can kind of see what he can do. So I really like what the Colts did for Anthony Richardson in this one. He's going to be protected. I mean, obviously he's going to have his carries, but in the pocket, the guy is going to be protected. And then you've got some more weapons for him now as well, because I didn't even mention the tight ends. The tight end group has a lot of talent. The Colts didn't do anything to it, but it already had a lot of talent, and guys just needed to be consistent and stay healthy. And they're really hoping this year is the year that we see guys really break out. You're waiting to see Jelani Woods be what he can be. Drew Ogletree as well. Will Mallory. Kylan Granson is solid. Mo Alley Cox is a solid blocker. I mean, he's never going to be that big-time receiving tight end. But you've got a really nice group of tight ends. So Anthony has weapons. He's got protection. If he and the other key players can stay healthy, this should be a big, big year for the offense. Calling it now. So coming up here in a bit, we're going to talk about the other side of things, and that's the Colts, not what they did immediately, but some of the future needs that they crossed off of their list. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball is in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. The Pacers are up 3-1 in their series with the Bucks right now, and FanDuel has the Pacers as 3.5-point favorites to close out the series on Tuesday night. At least last I checked. We'll see if that line moves at all. But you can monitor at FanDuel and bet your money on it. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And speaking of the Pacers, it's looking like their postseason is going to be extended, giving you more opportunities to go down and watch them at Gainbridge. The atmosphere in the building for playoff games is electric. I haven't been out there for this series, but I know when the Pacers were making the playoffs in the past with Paul George, George Hill, and those guys, that building gets rocking. They embrace the Pacers. The Pacers are giving them things to be excited about. They're an exciting team to watch, so you don't want to miss it. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Again, they've got the last-minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. And then, of course, one of my favorite parts of it, the lowest price guarantee or Gametime will credit you 100% of the difference if you find better tickets in that section somewhere else. So again, take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Okay, so going into the draft, everybody knew the Colts needed help in the secondary by any means. You know, they needed a starting level corner. They needed another starting level safety to complement Julian Blackmon. They needed the explosive pass catcher in the offense, whether that was a tight end like Brock Bowers or an outside receiver. So those were some of their biggest things, and they didn't do all of it. Cornerback and safety were needs that they didn't really address significantly. They did add Jalen Simpson in the secondary and Abraham as well at corner. So like they did add cornerbacks, but to me, neither of them factor in right away as big time contributors. I think Micah Abraham probably could sneak his way into being Kenny Moore's backup at nickel. Again, that's something we're going to talk about in a minute. Jalen Simpson, though, he would have to overtake Darrell Baker Jr., which is possible. But like even that is like the fourth or fifth corner on the roster. Like I think it'll be difficult for both Abraham and Simpson to make the roster. It's just not impossible. But they're going to have to boot a couple guys off that we may not expect them to. Simpson, something that works in his favor though is he can help contribute at safety. He was a safety at Auburn as well as played cornerback. So the Colts do have him listed at corner, but for my money, I thought his better path to the roster was to compete at free safety alongside Julian Blackmon. It's not what they did, but we'll see. You know, they have ample cap space to address either need if they want to. Personally, I think they want to be fine at corner. They intentionally went young last year for a reason. They're doing it. They're literally doing what they told us they were going to do. So us telling them that they need to go get another veteran corner or something, I just don't think it's going to happen. I think this is probably the group they're going to roll with. Safety, on the other hand, I think they would feel better if they added a capable veteran there, like a Quandre Diggs, maybe even Justin Simmons, who would be a little more expensive. It doesn't have to be a star. It's just it needs to be someone with starting experience. Julian Blackmon, you know, you're good there at strong safety. I mean, he's had some injury issues, but that is what it is. If he does get hurt, you feel better about Nick Cross replacing him at strong safety than starting at free safety, I think. Rodney Thomas, you're not comfortable with because he got benched at the end of the season. Ronnie Harrison Jr., you know, it'd be great to keep him in his role at linebacker because, you know, Nick Cross playing free safety with Ronnie Harrison being strong safety wasn't the greatest thing last year. So safety to me is still up in the air. I just think you need some definition there. Julian Blackmon, boom, that's your strong safety. Just go get a veteran free safety. And then you know what you have. You're more comfortable with Rodney Thomas and Nick Cross in depth roles. Daniel Scott maybe factors in there as well. Who knows? But I just think there's one more move you can make to be a little more comfortable with the secondary. They also, in terms of the things, the future needs they actually did meet, they didn't necessarily need offensive line, defensive line, and linebacker yet, but they definitely addressed it adequately. Again, adding Matt Consalves and Tanner Bortolini on the offensive line. Again, they didn't need line yet, but when you look at next year, you're going to, like, your whole interior is a free agent. You know, Ryan Kelly, free agent. Will Fries, Wesley French, Danny Pinter, and Jack Anderson, like I mentioned. Like pretty much all your interior guys except for Quentin Nelson are free agents next year. So adding Bortolini and Gonzalez, I mean, that they are insurance at the very least. I do think at least one of them is going to be a starter in 2025. So, and then on the defensive line as well, edge wasn't like a pressing need yet, but when you look at the next couple off seasons, you have Kwity Paye, Samson Ebukam, Tyquan Lewis, and Dio Adengbo all set to hit free agency over the next couple of springs. So you get ahead of that. You have the choice of what you're going to do with Kwity Paye's fifth-year option, but regardless, that's only one more year on the contract. So you go out and get Laiatu in the first round. Boom, that takes care of that. No matter, like he could be set up at Leo, and then whether it's Paye or Odengbo, that goes. You just don't know who the Colts are going to want to pay. There's more expectations for Kwity Paye, but he is a really, really good run defender. Dio Odengbo has become a pretty good all-around player. Ebukam as well. They all kind of offer similar traits. But then you add a kind of a developmental guy in Jonah Laulu at the end of the draft. Don't know that he's going to necessarily make the roster. Feels like a practice squad guy. But you do have, like an Eric Johnson that hasn't really done much yet. He's more of a nose tackle for depth. But Adetome Adebawore, he's not proven it yet. You think he's probably going to take a jump this season. But you just don't know. So a guy like Laulu is decent to have to kind of work on and mold and see if you can get anything out of them while you're waiting to see if your younger pieces on the defensive line are going to be around at all. And then Jalen Carlisle was a really interesting one as well. He's pretty much your Ronnie Harrison Jr. Is a safety convert down to linebacker. So you can have that pass coverage linebacker that we've been talking about all off season. He really fits that mold. Just really interesting. There's a long history of guys like that working out in the NFL. It doesn't always, but I mean, one guy who is going to be coaching him, Cato June, is a success story. He was a Pro Bowler for the Colts. June and Richard Smith, who is the Colts linebacker coach, really, really like this guy. And the coaching staff has experience working with someone like that in Divine Diablo when they were all with the Raiders. So this staff knows what to do with a guy like that. Now, of course, you can have a good kid with good athleticism and all that, and sometimes it just doesn't work. But I like the support system and baseline that the Colts have here to get this kid to where he can be, because they've done it successfully. There's proof even in this franchise of it happening as recently as Ronnie Harrison Jr. It's a really, really interesting move. So Carlisle kind of fills, if he could develop, he kind of fills a need at linebacker. Looking at next year, EJ Speed is a free agent, and then pretty much everybody else that contributed at linebacker except for Zaire Franklin is a free agent next year as well. Grant Stewart, Cam McGrone, Segun Alubi, like all of your depth. So if Carlisle can develop and be at the very least like your fourth linebacker going into next year, third or fourth linebacker, then this was a good pickup for them. But I would say they should have added more, but they already have so many linebackers on the roster for this year. There's just the mass exodus next year that you're looking at, but they have a lot of bodies there this year. So that one's kind of a tough one. I like the idea of adding one player who's maybe not ready to play yet, but by the time you need him next year, should be ready to roll. So I really like the idea of the Colts doing that one. So coming up next, we are going to look at the veterans that have been put on notice by some of these moves that the Colts made in the draft. All right, real quick, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. And I know you're saying, flag on the play, you already talked about that, and you have been talking about it. But there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. And the more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. You can get these really cool, unique stickers that you can trade with your friends to complete albums for bigger prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. hilarious emojis for taunting your friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. There's a ton, including their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything that you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. All right, now let's talk about kind of the unfun part of the draft when it comes to player acquisition and transactions. And that's the guys who have been kind of put on notice by way of the newcomers that are coming in. Now, this doesn't have to spell doom for these guys, but it adds competition, and it really says to these guys, like, you got to step up if you want to keep your roster spot. And a lot of these guys are capable of it. So first up is Alec Pierce. I think that's probably the most obvious one. So you draft a guy like A.D. Mitchell in the second round. You don't draft him to just be a rotational guy. Whether it's this year or next year, Mitchell is going to be a starter on this offense at some point, and that is going to be Alec Pierce's spot. Unless he has some sort of huge boom in his game, Michael Pittman is not getting replaced. Josh Downs isn't getting replaced either. That's Alec Pierce's spot. You're just looking for more productivity out of that starting outside receiver, and Mitchell has just got a ton of potential, and even Pierce at his best, if he's converting those long downfield shots that Anthony Richardson is more likely to throw him than Gardner Minshew was, I still don't know that that's enough. Mitchell just has a great all-around game, and if he develops like he should, then that really is going to be Pierce's spot to lose. Going up next is Will Fries at right guard. We know that Quentin Nelson is not going to lose his job. Ryan Kelly isn't either, as long as he's on the roster. So the additions of Gonsalves and Bortolini, if any starting spot is going to be relinquished this year, it's going to be right guard with Will Fries. I do think the Colts will be open to giving either of those guys a shot to start. But Will Fries, obviously, they're not just going to yank him out of that spot. He's going to have to lose the job, or one of those other two is just going to have to look so good. But Will Fries, that one seems a little less likely. The Alec Pierce one seems like an eventual reality, but Fries may keep the gig for another year until he hits free agency next year. And then next, you're looking on the defensive line, Kwity Paye, Samson Ebukam, and Dayo Odeyingbo. So Paye and Odeyingbo or perhaps free agents next year, depending on if the Colts pick up Paye's fifth-year option. Ebukam will be in 2026. So people are drawing a direct line to Kwity Paye as the big loser from the Latu pick. But I don't think that's necessarily true, because, Paye is your standout run defender and edge sealer at defensive end, while Latu is probably going to be more of your top dog pass rusher. And to me, Ebukam and Paye are similar somewhat, but if you're keeping someone on to defend the run, you're keeping Paye out there, I think. So Dayo Odeyingbo as well. He's a rotational guy, so I don't think it's like a huge threat. But, if he's not producing, that's going to eat into his snaps. We don't know what the Colts are going to do about their edge defenders next offseason if you're looking at Paye and Odeyingbo as both free agents. So I don't want to just put it on Kwity Paye. I'm going to put it on all three of them because we've also seen that Gus Bradley is going to be these guys don't have to have such rigid designated roles. Like, whatever skill sets, it doesn't matter. The best guys are going to be on the field. So I'm going to put all three of them on notice on that one. I also mentioned Ronnie Harrison Jr. a little bit by way of Jalen Carlies being on the roster. So Harrison was pretty good in limited fashion last year at linebacker. He had 2 interceptions, one of them against the Bengals. That was literally the only sign of life in that game. So he's a decent player, but it feels like Carlies is just a younger, more athletic version of that. So I mean, the Colts re-signed Harrison for a reason this offseason. But I mean, if Carlisle is a stud in training camp, then I mean, I don't know if Harrison's gonna get cut for it, but I mean, Carlisle could eat into his snaps during the season. I mean, if you've got a young athletic guy like that who's performing really well, you're not going to keep him off the field. You're going to allow him to continue developing, and that would be Harrison's role that he would be in. So last on the list is Darrell Baker Jr. and Chris Lamons. So we'll start with Baker Jr. He's an outside guy. That's really just if Jalen Simpson does anything in camp, really, because Baker is already behind Juju Brents and Jalen Jones and Dallas Flowers on the outside. Obviously, Kenny Moore in the slot. He's your top corner. He's not losing anything. So Baker in his role as like the fourth or fifth outside corner, that could be in trouble. If Simpson does anything really well in camp, it felt like the Colts were finding any reason to keep Baker off the field at times last year until they absolutely had to. And when they absolutely had to was after that Saints game when Tony Brown just could not do it. So I don't think the Colts are really married to Baker by any means. They did re-sign him as a restricted guy this year. But I mean, he's quality to have his depth and competition in the cornerback room. But again, they just signed an athletic, versatile rookie. If he's doing anything, you know, that's going to be Baker's job to lose, I think. And then Chris Lamons as really the only backup nickel to Kenny Moore right now. Micah Abraham seems like a guy. I mean, obviously he's got playmaking ability. He had 12 interceptions in his college career. He had over 40 pass breakups. He is undersized, but when you're playing that in the nickel, it's not that big of a deal. He's got speed as well. Shirley has special teams ability. So those are two veterans. They're depth guys, but when I saw Simpson come in and they said he was going to be a corner and I saw Abraham, I immediately thought Baker and Lamons are the guys who really need to fight for their spots throughout the spring and summer in order to keep those. So let me know what you guys think about that, especially any veterans you think that have kind of been put on notice. Thoughts on the rest of the show, sure. But I think that's probably the one that's most up for debate is veterans that are really going to have to stand out the rest of this offseason and summer if they want to keep their spot. So obviously, if you guys don't already, follow at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2 on Twitter. Also be sure to subscribe on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. We would love your ratings and reviews as well. And with that, we will see you guys tomorrow.